Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Expanded You podcast. So today we have my dear friend Juliana Bishop sharing her story of how she was a VP of an interior design firm before, basically the highest position she could get at that company at the time. And she was feeling so unfulfilled that she burned all that down, left her job, and started her own firm and her own company and started to be an entrepreneur for herself. We talked about how she had near death experiences that really were just wake up calls for her to really evaluate what she wanted in her life and if she wanted to continue down that path. And really, it was those wake up calls that allowed her to start questioning everything, how she overcame the fear of starting something new, like a brand new business. And we also talked about fitting in. Do you feel like we're trying to look for validations from others? Where Julie was trying to fit in her job and her marriage and her role as a mother and all that she was doing for other people rather than for herself. So we're going to talk about her experience of how she learned to make decisions for herself and not for other people, stop the people pleasing. And I am so excited to share this story with you guys. So without further ado, here is Juliana Bishop. So, welcome. Today we have another guest with us, Juliana Bishop. We met at the Build Your Brand Live events that Jen Gottlieb and Chris Winfield hosted in Atlanta a few months ago, I believe now. And then the minute we met at the cocktail party, we just hit it right off. And we probably spoke for like 2-3 hours nonstop until like we were almost the last people to leave that cocktail party.
So true. Thank you so much for having me here today. And yes, that was such an amazing night. It was just one of those moments when you just meet someone who you must have known in another lifetime. That's what it felt like.
For sure. And for those who don't know, we're both kind of introverted people. And I remember Julie walking up and we're there. It's a networking event. So like they told us, put yourself out of your comfort zone and really go meet people. And I'm so happy and I'm so grateful. Julie came up to me in a little awkward in the beginning, and we both felt that way. But then we just opened up to each other and we're both quite woo-woo. And then I think we just learned we have so much commonality basically in our stories, and I cannot wait to share her story with you guys today because she's overcome a lot in her journey of how she was in the corporate world and then she's now an entrepreneur for her. So I cannot wait for us to dive into that. So thank you, Julie.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. And I have to say, I am extroverted in many ways in my life, but when I get into a room of people I don't know, the introvert comes out. So I must have a dual personality or something. And so I'm so grateful that you were open to speaking with me, no matter how awkward it was. You had asked me about my past and how I got to where I am today. And really, the biggest pivot happened years ago. I was an interior designer working at a big firm. I had made my way up to the vice president of the company, and it was a lot of work. I had a new baby, and I had a husband who had just lost his job and started a business for himself, and he was unsure about doing. And there was just a lot of chaos in our life at the time. We also went through some construction of our home and adding on to it. So a lot of things happened over a short period of time that gave me a wake-up call. I had climbed the corporate ladder as far as I could go. I didn't like what I saw when I got to the top. There was a lot of things happening in the company that I became privy to that didn't sit well with me ethically. And I really struggled with it. And I decided to make a 6-month exit plan. But it took a lot of events in my life to take place for me to be brave enough at that time and courageous enough. I would say that my self-esteem was not the best at the time, even though it seemed like it on the outside. It was fake. It wasn't true. Talk about imposter syndrome. I was speaking in stages across the country. I was running a large department, traveling all over the East Coast from Mississippi East, both north and south. And yet inside, I did not have the confidence in myself to really listen to my intuition at the time. I was like I was asleep. So I had three events that happened. The first event that happened was I was in the third floor of our stone house, cantilevered over a large wooden stairwell on a ladder that was just sitting on a rug at the top, not on the first step, but on the top for some reason. Not very smart. And as I was reaching inside to see where the leak was coming from the roof, I was up in that ceiling on the third floor. All of a sudden, the ladder just went out from beneath me. And I had nothing to grab onto. Like, I just went down with it. I went against the stone wall. I landed midway on the stairwell with the ladder and went all the way down to the stone floor at the bottom, head first, keeping my head up, trying not to break my neck. And my son is standing at the top of the stairs. I think he was 3 or 4 at the time. And he's screaming. My husband at the time came running and came down the stairs. And thankfully, miraculously, I just had some bruises, scrapes and bruises.
Wow.
No broken bones, no internal injuries. I don't even know, but for the grace of God, how that really happened. But it did make me stop and think, what am I doing with my life? Is this what I should be doing with my life? Am I contributing? Am I making a difference? Is this really where I need to be? So those conversations started waking something up in me. I'd always been a spiritual person. I'd also been a religious person up until the time I got married, and I married an atheist. And over the years, I kind of just shut all those parts of me down to fit in to what I thought he wanted as a wife. Not that he asked me to. These are things I did on my own. And then I was driving with my son to see my family. It was a 6-hour trip from Baltimore to Syracuse. Was at a pit stop. My son had fallen asleep. We were taking off. I was at a stoplight and my light turned green and I started to go and I just heard stop and I slammed the brakes on. I don't know where the voice came from, but a car came flying by me like way over the speed limit. And it was a flash and it was literally inches away from the front of my car. And I knew I had just escaped certain death for myself and possibly my child in the back seat. And I was shaking and I made it through the light and I pulled over to the side of the road and I called my sister and I just started sobbing. Again, the whole way home, I was thinking, how am I living my life? Is this the way I should be living it? Am I really doing what I was put on this planet for? Something's got to change. And it really made me evaluate what was going on at work. And then at the same time at work, right before I got my promotion to vice president, I was working as a director and they had brought in a woman who they told me was going to be a liaison between my department and the purchasing department. And I was warned by a couple other people that they thought there was something else going on. So I was keeping my ears open. I'd lost a couple nights of sleep trying to figure it out. And lo and behold, her and I had to travel. This new person and I had to travel to one of our job sites. I was walking her through everything I was doing, and I was walking her through all the processes, and this is what we do when this happens. And we went out to dinner that night, and she said, "You are an incredible person. And I have to be honest with you, I have been brought in to replace you. And I'm going to tell you right now, when I go back, I'm giving my resignation. And the reason why is I can't do what you do. I'm an interior designer who's been a director of design firms. You go way beyond that. You do what 2.5 people would do, and I don't want that job."
Wow.
So we went back to the office. She gave her resignation. And when she did, she told the president of the company, "You need to promote her. She is doing well beyond a director's job. This is what she's doing. I could never do that. It would take 2.5 of me to do it." So I did get the promotion. I got an apology. And I decided at that time, that 6 months, that I was going to leave. And I did. I left and I started my own firm. And it was going well. We grossed over 6 figures the first year. And I got pregnant with my daughter. And there was still some things. I was still doing the design work. It was a little bit different. It was more sustainable. We were working on sustainability at the time. I helped start the Eco Week in Baltimore, and lots of great things were happening. But there was still something a little off, and I didn't know what it was. And after finding out I was pregnant, my husband and I started talking about moving. And with my business partner at the time, we talked about creating an office in Baltimore and an office in Massachusetts nearer to his parents. And then I was driving on the Beltway around Baltimore when I got in an accident, an actual accident. I was pregnant at the time. I bent the steering wheel and I panicked and I couldn't feel the baby moving. And I went to the hospital and I was there overnight. And the baby was fine. Thank God she's now 19. But at the time, I had a long time to think in that hospital bed. And I'm like, if I move, something's got to change. I'm not going down the path that I think I was meant to be. I know I still help people. I mean, interior design is a beautiful industry. It's a great job. It does help people. You create beautiful spaces for them to live in and thrive in, but something just still wasn't right. So after leaving the corporate job and starting my design firm, 2 years in, I'm moving away. I had a 6-month-old with me and a 5-year-old at the time. I moved to the Berkshires in Massachusetts. And that year, I had to not only be an interior designer, but I had 2 other jobs to create the life that we wanted to live and support the lifestyle that we wanted to be in. My husband's job, the economy kind of crashed, and the work all went overseas. And he
Mm.
was in a real struggle and in a real funk and in a depression. And at that time, I happened upon a book called The Dark Side of the Light Chasers. And being a spiritual
Mm.
person and having been awoken by these events in my life, it was important to me. I was really seeking at the time,
Mm.
seeking
Mhm.
answers. Why was I feeling the way I was feeling? Why am I not satisfied in my life? I've got 2 beautiful children and I'm building this beautiful house and I have a husband. Like, what is going on? And
Mm.
that's kind of what started my journey. Even though I was into entrepreneurship already, it started my journey more into personal development. Long story short, leading up to today, I am no longer with that husband, and I am an entrepreneur and working for myself and building a coaching practice and personal development and professional development because I believe that you can be a leader, you can be very successful on the outside, you can have the finances and the money in the bank and the right cars and the right house and all these things can be in place, and yet there's still something missing for you. And those are the
Mhm.
people that I want to serve in helping them not only connect more deeply with themselves, but more deeply with the people that are beneath them, their teams, their families, their significant others, to
Mm.
create a more holistic life. And I do specialize in ethics, one that is ethical, responsible, and makes them proud. It's something that they were
Mm.
called instead of just
Yeah.
being in a job.
Wow. I want to dive a little bit more about the moment where you had the first accident from falling from the ladder and then
Okay.
that near miss of the accident. What really prompted you to see that event as asking questions for yourself? What am I really doing? What happened before that that made you ask those questions?
It was a wake up call. I've been a spiritual person since I can remember, even as a small child, connecting with nature and asking deep questions has always been a part of who I am. I was a serious child. I had deep questions and I asked everybody and was not finding answers. So I think being a seeker, someone who likes to learn continually as part of my growth,
Mm.
I think that deep inside, it took a jolt for me to wake up to ask myself those questions because I was on
Mm.
autopilot. I
Mhm.
literally wanted to fit into this life I had created for myself. I wanted to
Mm.
fit into this marriage. I wanted to fit into motherhood and everything else. So everyone was first. I forgot about me.
Mm.
I was out of the
Mhm.
equation somehow. Everyone
Wow.
else's lives mattered more than my own.
Yeah.
And that wake up call, I guess there was just something in me that needed to be shaken up.
Yeah. That's something interesting. You said that when you were a kid, you always like to ask the deep questions, and I can definitely relate to that. I remember I was a child, probably less than 10 years old, around the 6, 7, I don't even remember how old I was. But I started asking myself, I'm like, who am I? And I was looking out in the window in the car and just thinking back, I didn't, looking at a child right now as an adult, I wouldn't think that a child could think that way. But I want to ask you this question. Have you ever felt like the fact that you were more of a deep thinker, that you didn't fit in with the other people growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that I dumbed myself down in school to fit in. Like, I was always adjusting myself to the environment so that I didn't
Mm,
stand out because inside I stood out. Maybe there were others like me and I didn't know it and they were doing the same thing. But I used to have this saying that I kind of coming from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, I was a misfit in the land of misfits. I kind of branched between so many different groups of people that
mhm,
I was in the popular crowd in high school. And I think it was just because I could morph into any position or
mm,
group easily
mhm,
because I was able to fit in. And that was my mask that right because
yeah,
I didn't feel like I fit in on the inside, but I made a way. It's just one of my, I guess it was a survival tactic that has served me. It's been a
mhm,
positive thing for some roles that I've had to have in my life. But becoming more authentic and true to who I am is more important to me now
mm.
than fitting in.
So talk to us a little bit about that, because I feel like a lot of us listening can definitely relate to wanting to fit in and hiding parts of ourselves that we feel like, oh, what are they going to think of me if I said that thing? Or what are they going to think of me if I bring in my little quirkiness or whatever I think is funny? What if other people don't think it's funny, right? All these things that goes on in our minds when we're trying to fit in. So how did you went from trying to fit in into your job, fit into your marriage, fit in as a mother, to really becoming the authentic version as who you are right now? Because I believe that you're a lot more authentic than maybe you were back then, even though I didn't know you
For
back then.
sure. I think the core person is still here, but not making any, and we all have masks no matter what. Like, we can't get rid of them. I think it's part of who we are and how we identify with one another. But what really blew up for me was moving to the Berkshires and being here and discovering that even though I moved, anywhere you go, there you are, you're still the same person. And I still had the same deep longing and need to find out why I wasn't happy. Because at that point, I
Mm,
was literally felt burnout. I probably had some postpartum depression, who knows? And I just felt dead inside. So coming across that book that I mentioned at the Berkshire Co-op about the dark side of the light chasers, basically I started reading that, and she was talking about that. She was talking about, here she was, a drug addict. Debbie Ford is her name. And how she was a drug addict, how she was living this crazy life, and she was in Florida and dancing on tables and partying hard and had been in several rehabs. And she just had this moment when it was like, is this all there is? Is this it? Like, I could die. And what am I going to do that's different? And as I was reading this book, I'm like, I got to see this woman. I was not a person who went to workshops at the time. I'd only been to one in my life. I looked her up and she was coming to a place very close to where I lived. We were building a house at the time. I had asked my husband if I could go. Listen, I asked him, like, this is how the role I was in. I needed permission to go. And I asked him if it
mm,
was okay if I went. Could he watch the kids as if they weren't his own children? And he's not a babysitter, they're
mm,
his kids too. And he was like, if you can come up with a way to fund it, sure. And I got creative. I sold a bunch of building products and made exactly the amount I needed for the workshop. And I went to the workshop. And what Debbie Ford taught me essentially in that 3-day weekend at Omega Institute, and then when I studied with her after that, because I did choose to study
mm,
with her for years, she brought me back to myself. She
mm,
taught me how to love the parts of myself I rejected, the aspects of
mm,
myself that I didn't want anyone else to see. I learned how to value myself and give myself validation and not needing it from other people, and realizing other people aren't thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves. I mean, you're so worried about how you're going to come across. Yeah, it might, for a fleeting moment, they might judge you because we do judge people. That's part of being human. But ultimately it's the judge within us that is the opponent, right? That's the person
Mhm.
that's the hardest on ourselves. I was in a marriage for 22 years where he was really hard on me mentally and emotionally, but there was nothing that he said during that time that was any worse than what I said to myself in the mirror. When
Mm.
I learned that, and I learned how to talk to myself and to look myself in the eye and to be honest with myself, is how I found that voice again. That's how I found the authentic Julie that was there. And I'm not saying that it happened overnight, because this was years. I mean, I'm still doing it. I'm still doing those meditations and practices, because there's always something for us to find within ourselves that's holding us back, or that's telling us we're not worthy or not enough or not lovable, or whatever our big shadows are that we carry in our lives. We're always peeling the layers, right? You think you've healed it, and then it comes up in a different way for you to heal it some more. And I think that's a lifelong process. But I think that was a pivotal moment for me. Was I felt like 10 years of therapy in one weekend. I was carrying anger I had no idea I had. I was people pleasing beyond and above and belief. I am a recovering people pleaser. And just now I check in with me. Does this feel right for me? Is this what I want to do? Is this the best for me today? And
Mhm.
I make choices. I can say no. That took a long
Wow.
time to learn that.
Yeah. What were some of the things that you were telling yourself in the mirror when you were learning that?
Oh, it's just that who's going to listen to you? You're not good enough. You're not that important. Their needs are more important than yours. Who are you to be so selfish? All these different things. You look ugly today. Oh my God, look at those
Mhm.
circles under your eyes. Look at how much weight you've gained. I mean, literally, it's the list of the gamut. Anyone who takes time to just be the observer of their own language about
Mm.
themselves will hear it. Everyone's
Yeah.
voice is different, but I'm sure that the messages are similar. They say
Mhm.
women are never satisfied with their bodies. So think about the different things a woman might say about her body to herself as she's taking a shower or looking in the mirror when she's getting
Mhm.
dressed. I mean, those are the kinds of things I'm talking about. Yeah.
Right. Let's talk about that because I do believe that image of the body, I don't even want to say 100%, but very close to 99% of women experience that, right? How do you overcome loving on your body image, regardless of the number on the scale, regardless of how it fits in the clothes and everything?
Oh, that's a daily practice of compassion, right? And love for yourself. I mean, when you get to the point where you can lather up in the shower, and as you're rubbing with your washcloth, thanking your arms for being there, that you have arms, you have legs, you have feet, and just
Mm.
accepting them where they're at. If you need to name your body parts, like my little roll, she got a name, and I talk to her with love, and that is how it's done. When she disappears, I'm like, oh, where's my blah blah blah. When I gain a little bit more weight and she comes back, oh, there you are, sweetheart. Like, and just loving where you're at and who you're at. And I'm not saying
Mm.
that I still don't have some of those negative thoughts. I didn't get rid of them. It's just I know that they're not in charge anymore, and I've quieted their volume.
Mm.
And if I say
Mhm.
it in my head, I'll say, "Oh, really? Thanks for your opinion, but," and then I can switch the dialogue. At any time, you can
Mm.
switch. Words have power. Say it, speak it out
Yeah.
loud. Speak out the positive out loud.
That's so huge because it's just like you need to start with that awareness, right? Of the words that you were telling yourself and you were beating yourself with. Basically, oh, why do you look that way? Why is my role showing up? I wish I could hide it. I wish I could go away. All these things are judgment to ourselves. And until we realize that these are judgments and they're not serving us, we won't even be able to switch that talk, right? So first always start with
Yeah,
that awareness. And then I love what you said is love on those parts of yourselves. And even though they may not be where the ideal image that you want it to be, that they're still your arms. You're still using your arms to feed yourself. You're still using your arms to drive. You're still using your legs to walk around, even though you may not like them, but they're still working for you. And I love how you just shared, like, talk to them like you're loving them, maybe even as a kid or as you're talking to a child or as you're talking to a pet, right? And just love
right.
on them. That you don't always love your kids, they can get on your nerves, but you
Mhm.
won't take away the love for them, right? And that's how I learned what self love could look like. You don't have to like
Right.
it all the time, but you still always love
Exactly.
them. And so I love what you shared. And even the role that comes up is that you still love on it and say, hey, you're back, and that's okay.
Shit happens, right? Things happen in your life that might knock you down, like having the closest people you love turn on you in judgment, or even if it's out of love, and it might not be easy, it might be difficult, and you may slide into that old pattern. But it's about creating new patterns and new neural grooves. Like if you're repeating something, once you start healing some of those things and you can find a place of love for yourself, and then something happens and that old voice comes back in, it's the practice of repeating the opposite and being
Mm,
aware of that and nurturing yourself and looking in the mirror, or having a picture of yourself when you were young sitting by your bed that you can look at and just love on her if you can't love on you at the moment. It's a
mhm,
lot easier to love on
mm,
children. But you do these little practices, and that repetition creates the new groove. So it's
mm,
easier. It gets easier with time and repetition. Debbie Ford used to have this saying about affirmations are great, but if you're not healing what's underneath, it's like putting whipped cream on poop. And
mm,
that's what I'm talking about. Like you do need to do the fundamental foundational work first,
yeah,
and then the practices become easier and easier.
mm,
So whether you're
yeah,
working it out with a therapist, or you're working it out with a coach, or you're working it out with a friend, or you're working it out in the mirror with yourself, however you're doing it, there's many avenues, meditations, yoga, like there's all kinds of ways of doing personal development and self-healing, whatever practice you use, and use one of
mhm,
them. There's so many tools. That's when in that everyday life, after you've gotten to some of those root issues and you're changing the old tapes and you're changing the old belief systems that no longer serve you, you can completely create new beginnings in your life at any time. And you're never too
mhm,
old, never too young.
yeah,
Like it's a practice that can happen at any age, right? It's just
yeah,
these are the tools, these emotional intelligence tools that we're not given
yeah.
in school necessarily.
The change is never easy. And for somebody listening, they are feeling the same way. I know I'm meant for more, but I'm scared to try that new business idea. Or I'm not even sure if that business idea is good for me. Who am I to think that I can do that? What would you recommend to them?
Well, who are you not to do it? Also, when you are given certain gifts, or you come in the world and you nurture and you grow certain gifts, giving them to others is a gift, right? And if we're just sitting in our fear and we're staying in the fear and we're letting the fear keep us from putting that stuff forward, we're not only hurting ourselves, but we're hurting all the people that really need our help and our support and our gifts. So I
Mm,
would say do it anyway. Fear does
mhm,
not go away. So step into it.
mhm,
Just like when you're
mhm,
doing a martial arts move, you don't necessarily fight against the person. You use their movements and you step into them to get your movements and to get away. It's the same kind
mhm,
of deal. You just take fear and put them in the side seat and say, okay, I hear you. I'm afraid. Sit here. We're going to do this together anyway. And you move forward and you take one step
mhm,
at a time. Don't look at the big picture. Don't look at the big vision that you have. Just do one step and gather people around you that are like minded, gather support systems that will help you do your research, maybe not quit your day job at first and build on the side if that feels more comfortable to you and you don't have the means to do it otherwise. These are the things that I would suggest to people to do. Like,
mhm,
we are here for a reason, and many reasons. It's not just one. We don't have just one single purpose. I mean, there's a lot of
mhm,
us that are multi-passionate souls that have a lot of things that we're good at and a lot of things that we like to do. It's just about taking those steps to share them with others. It's
mm,
important to do.
yeah,
It's,
right.
it's not about you in the end. It's about what we create for others. It's about legacy. It's about continuing on and giving back to the world.
Yeah, we all have that duty. Yeah, we all have that duty, right, to share our own gifts to others, and that's why it feels so good to help somebody understand a problem, or if they're having issue, to help somebody, and then the feeling that you get after doing it, you feel so good inside of you, and you feel so proud of yourself.
You need the opportunity to help others mentor you and teach you and contribute to you and believe in you, because that gives them something as well. I mean, when you do that for your friends and other people, it's
Mhm.
amazing a feeling, right? You feel like
Yeah.
just so good about what you could do for them.
Mhm.
So don't deny them the same for you. Don't try to do it
Wow.
in a silo by yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, I love that. It's like if you don't allow yourself to be helped by other people, then you're taking away that feeling for them that they can get after
Yeah,
helping you, right? So
exactly.
you're actually giving as well while
Yeah.
you're receiving
Full
from
circle.
somebody. So that's, yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I want to go back a little bit in your story. You said you had a 6-month plan to leave the job. What happened? What was that plan?
Okay, so my plan was to get a solid business plan together, get funding together, make sure that we could pay our bills while building this new thing. I started putting the word out to people of what we were doing and finding people to collaborate with that were already connected to us in some way, so that when the day finally came for me to resign, that everything was in place to just pick up and start.
Mhm.
So
Wow.
secured an office, had a partnership agreement created. One of my top designers actually left the company before I did, and she joined me in the joint venture when I finally gave my resignation as well. So
Wow.
we had a lot of mentors, a lot of help to step right out and step right into business.
Wow. And
Yeah.
then I even want to backtrack a little bit more. What was it that you were hearing or that you were feeling that this is not right for you at that moment when you were already the highest position that you could get at the company and you're basically shutting all that down?
Yeah. Well, there was the ethical piece of things that
Mhm.
were happening that I didn't agree with, that I didn't think were right. There was the piece of the materials we were using were not sustainable. And even though
Mhm.
I tried to steer the company that way, there's a limitation, and you can't climb any higher when you're the next person underneath the CEO.
Mhm.
So there was a lot of factors that went into that, but also it wasn't fulfilling to me anymore. Even though I was
Mhm.
doing good work, I mean, I was creating interiors for seniors and senior living communities, all the way from the dementia units to the assisted living to the independent living, which was important work. I just wasn't feeling like I was making that big of a difference, and that
Mhm.
some of the gifts that I had were not being utilized. I really
Mhm.
believed personal development was still important to me at that time. It wasn't like it was new to it. I had read Louise Hay, How to Heal Your Life, in my early 20s, and I believed that there were things I was put on the planet to do that I wasn't doing at the
Mhm.
time.
Mhm.
So,
Wow.
and that was directly helping individuals, like one on one. And I had a coach at the time, an executive coach, who I really enjoyed everything I was doing with her, and didn't even know that such a job existed. So I
Wow.
think that planted some seeds for
Yeah.
my later endeavors.
So all those pieces together and understanding, I think oftentimes the reason we want to try to fit in into a job or try to fit in into a relationship is because we cannot recognize that we actually have more to offer or that we have more gifts inside of us that is not being fully utilized or being shown to the world really and expressed by you. And I really appreciate what you just said is the fact that you recognize that your gifts were not fully utilized and that you were not being fulfilled. And that is exactly related that you were not being fully you, and it caused you to fit in and try to fit in into that box that you've kind of like when a cat I have cats and it's like a cat is too big to fit in the box. That's what we often do to ourselves, right? And it's not comfortable. And why do we keep doing that to ourselves,
Uh,
right?
I
And
don't
for any
know.
of
I don't
us,
know. And it didn't help also that the woman that ran the company, who I had highly admired and felt was like a mentor and friend, had not believed in me and had put someone,
mm,
had not been honest with me, had not sat down and communicated with me that she wasn't sure I was the right one for the position and wanted to
yeah,
replace me. Like
right,
it could have gone down a whole different way. And it
yeah,
didn't. And because it went down the way it did, that also spurred me to make a different plan because I didn't feel valued and appreciated in my role because I quietly did my role. And I guess I made it look easy.
yeah,
And I was working long hours. I'm being a new mom, working long hours and for someone else and their benefit.
yeah,
It just didn't align for me anymore.
yeah. Looking back, how do you feel when you think about those people who didn't believe in you, who were trying to shut you off, and who was trying to replace you? How do you feel about them now?
Actually, I did a lot of work around that when I worked with Debbie Ford. I did shadow work around that. I owned my responsibility in that too. And I completely forgive and understand where she was coming from and wish her the best. There was a lot of redeeming qualities that she had, and she taught me a lot. So I was able to kind of flip that disappointment and that valuing. It's really not on her to value me, it's on me to value me. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. That's beautiful. And I almost want to thank her for trying to push you out of the company because if not for that, then you wouldn't be
But
able to share your wisdom and your knowledge and your gifts to all of us and to even just now any of us who's listening. So, no.
yeah, and I feel the same way about my former husband. I mean, yes, was there some abusive qualities there? Yes, but at the same time, he was one of my greatest teachers. Had I not had that experience with him, one, I wouldn't have two incredible human beings for children that are smart and loving and compassionate people. But I wouldn't have been as independent and as strong
Mm,
and as determined as
yeah.
I have been if I hadn't had that relationship. So it really has
Yeah.
shaped who I am and how I look at the world and how I help other people. So
Hmm. Wow. And I believe any of us who's listening, if you think back to your journey growing up, whatever family you grew up in, whatever job you've had before, do you feel any regret of what happened? For me, when I think back, is I'm so thankful for everything, all the obstacles that had happened because it shaped me for who I am, and I wouldn't have changed for anything for it to happen differently because I wouldn't have been able to become who I am today. And so, thinking back, applying that same analogy, if we're experiencing any obstacles right now in this season of our lives that is a little bit harder to bear, it's like, why is that happening for me? I can't wait for that to be over, right? If we apply that same knowledge, is if we feel like the past we wouldn't have changed anything, then this current path that we're going through right now is also kind of the same environment where we're just going through other obstacles that are happening right now, and for us to become that future better version. And so if our future version doesn't want to change anything that's happening right now to us, then we might as well ride it through. And that kind of helps me sometimes to go through any obstacles that come my way. So I thought I fixed that. Why is it coming back? So just, I want to share that for anybody who's listening to us right now.
yeah, and I want to add to that conversation, that attitude can be tricky if you've been a victim of war, a victim of sexual abuse, or deep trauma. It's not always easy to say, "Oh, I'm glad that happened to me." It's not so much about that happening to you as it is what you do with it after. So I just want to be careful because I know in the spiritual personal development world, there is a lot of people that have had some
Yeah.
deep trauma and deep abuse that it's not so easy just to say, "Oh, I'm so glad that happened to me. I don't regret that."
Yeah.
Like if I could change anything, I'm sure they would change that. That they would change
Mm-hmm.
the fact that that happened to them. And we talked a lot about things that happen to you, happen for you, and it's not so much that in that case as it is, okay, it did happen. And once you work through that with someone, now what can you do with it? Now, how can you change your life
Yeah.
in spite of it and
Yeah.
make something beautiful and a springboard of something more powerful because that did
Hmm.
happen to you. So I just want to mention that as well.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good point. It makes us to be even qualified to help people who are going through the same traumas, sexual trauma, abuse, because only the people who have gone through those experiences can fully understand all the emotional torments that happens in somebody. And we talked about leaving a legacy and making an impact. And I believe that those experiences that we go through make us qualified to help other people. So there is also power in coming out and winning over those traumatic experiences as well.
Yeah, I think about this
Yeah.
woman who was I can't remember her name. She's a doctor here in the US, but she was in Auschwitz and was a dancer. And she overcame so much that happened to her in the concentration camp. And in the fact, in the end, she was pulled out of one of the death piles. An American soldier saw her hand move and pulled her out. And she has an incredible story of survival because of what happened to her. Some of the cruelest things can happen. I have fellow coaches that I know who have had such traumatic beginnings by people that were supposed to love them and protect them, who are now just some pillars of light doing amazing, amazing work. I'm sure they
Yeah.
wish they could change those things that happened to them, but they are doing something tremendous with it now. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you, Julie. If somebody wanted to look you up and find you, where can they find you?
Juliana Bishop. And my handle is also Juliana, but it's JulianaBiannabishop. So that's whether it's LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. I'm pretty much on most of the socials, so they can find me that way too.
Awesome. And we'll link those all in the show notes for all of you guys. And thank you so much, Julie, for sharing your time with us and sharing your own experience and your journey and your stories of how you found
Thank
yourself to
you.
become a more authentic version of you and to really make that difference in the world. So thank you for who you are.
Thank you. Thank you for being here and thank you for having this show. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And for anybody listening, make sure you follow the show, and we'll be bringing more episodes and more content like this to really help you and show you what's possible for you through stories of people who've already experienced it, who make them qualified to show you what can be possible for you. So, see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.